Hey, welcome everybody to the second episode of the movie Morgue. And what I wanted to start with for what I really consider the first episode. Last week, all I did was pretty much introduce myself and lay out what I wanted to do with the show. What I've decided to do for our first real episode is delve into the origins of the horror film. If you have any knowledge of film history, if you've ever taken any film courses, some of this or a lot of it will probably be a rehash for you, obviously. But for those out there who, don't know, I thought this would be kind of an interesting place to start. Now, when cinema first came into being, late 1800s, it was really just a novelty, and most films, if you went to like a Nickelodeon or something, if you either saw them through a hand crank device or if you actually went and saw them on a screen, most of what a program was a lot of really quick, sometimes as short as 5 seconds clips. And there really wasn't much of a story behind them. It was much more of the novelty of, say, train arriving in a station. That's a very famous one. And all it is just people at a train station watching a train pull in. And there's that famous Edison film, The Electrocution of an Elephant, which, if you're an animal lover like me, is actually kind of a hard thing to watch because they basically take an elephant and they electrocute it. And they filmed it just for the benefit of filming the death of an elephant for whatever weird reason. So it took a little while before they decided that, hey, we can actually do more than just show everyday stuff that people can see on an everyday basis in their own lives. We can actually tell stories. And really one of the first people to grasp the power of fantasy and the horror medium was George Melies. And this is a guy who was a French musician, and he also did a lot of set design for the Grand Guignol, if I pronounce that properly. He really knew how to make interesting sets for films, for plays, and decided to try out the film medium. And he's one of the people who really developed the first in-camera tricks. I have a book that I got. It's right here. Trip to the Movies and Story of His Life. Great book, by the way. I don't know if you can find this anymore. It was really a rare thing when I bought it. It might be on Amazon, I'm not sure. But if you're interested in him and his life, really a great read. Lots of great pictures of his work. And he was the first person to discover, at least as far as I know, okay, if you go and you have someone stand there and then you turn the camera off and they walk off, and then you turn the camera back on, it looks like they vanished mysteriously, and nowadays, that's one of the easiest effects in the book. But back then that was a big revelation. And he started making these, originally they were kind of short, but then they got longer, more like 10 minutes. He started making these films that were just amazing fantasy films. The one that everybody knows, when they talk about George Melies, is A Trip to the Moon. And there he is. There's our favorite moon-faced guy. That's one everybody has seen, I think. And I love that picture because it's just such a perfect example of what he did with the medium. Everything was very theatrical, but man, was it visually stunning. Another one he did was a Conquest of the Pole. And this one is great because it has this gigantic snow monster that comes up out of the ice, and grabs people with these giant puppet arms and eats them. And yep, there he is. And he's got one of the explorers in his hand there. You know, it's so funny. It's when you look at this stuff, it's goofy now. But back then, you know, people saw that and were like, holy crap, that's amazing. You know, that was something that was really exciting and interesting to look at. And like I said, most of these things that he did were anywhere like 5 to 10 minutes long, and really opened the door for the genre, the horror genre, to start taking root. And you know, it didn't really take off, even though there was a lot of stuff. There's another one, Disciple in a convent, I believe, or the devil in the convent, I believe is what that one's called there that you're looking at. And like, you know, like that giant head right there is articulated. The eyes would move and the jaws would open and close. You know, that's a perfect example of what his stuff was. Very, very, very visual. The kind of thing that at the time, like I said, for people who are just used to seeing, you know, even just slapsticky stuff, you know, people, you know, falling down or hitting each other with a pie or whatever. You know, this was something different. This is a great one. This is the Magician's Apprentice, I believe, is what it's called. Oh, or the Apprentice's Nightmare. And I love this. Again, you know, articulated head. He built this giant set, and the mouth, you can see somebody's foot hanging out. He, you know, he chomps on down. And the sad thing with George Melies is that he wasn't able to keep up with the times. Sadly, his career went down fast, it went down pretty quickly. After only about maybe a decade, he was already considered passé, which, you know, is sad. It was mainly more because of his inability to adapt to the medium. His stuff at first was very interesting, but sadly remained stage bound, as you could, you know, you can see. I mean, everything, as cool as it is, everything does look like you're looking at a stage play. So it was up to other directors with a little more visual sense and ability to tell a story to come along and move things forward. One of the earliest examples is from D.W. Griffith, and it's an adaptation. It's sort of an adaptation of The Telltale Heart, and it's called The Avenging Conscience. There you go. And this thing, it's ironically, you can actually find this. This is still available. You know, you can find this. I think it's from on a set from the company Kino, who does a lot of packages a lot of silent films. And this was about a guy who murders his rival, his romantic rival. And you know, of course, what happens? There he is, killing the guy, strangling him. And of course, so what happens, you know, during the course of the film is that he starts to have the hallucination that this guy is, you know, coming back from the dead. And actually, this is a great scene with the skeleton coming after him right there. And however, you know, it's if you ever watch it, it's an interesting step forward, but again, it is a little bit static. Not the greatest film that you may watch, but you know, Griffith was someone who was very much into the epic. And early on, his films were still a little small scale. He was still kind of finding himself as a filmmaker. The film that really took people by surprise and ushered in what a lot of people consider the the first age of horror was the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a film that most people have if you haven't seen it, they at least know of it. It's a beautiful film to look at. I absolutely love it. There's your stars, and Werner Krauss and Conrad Veidt as the somnambulist. God, what a trippy word for me to try and spit out. And it's a film, one of the first imports from Germany that really showcased German expressionism. And you know, the effect that it had on American filmmakers is you can't even put it into words, really, because up until that point, everything that you saw in films usually was pretty straightforward, even if you had something that might be a mystery or something. And this was an example of a film that came along and absolutely rewrote the rules of what a film should be visually. I've seen this film, I can't tell you how many times. If you've ever taken a film history course, this is one of the ones they want you to watch. And with good reason. It's one of those films that, much like later films like, say, a Blue Velvet or Suspiria or one of the films like that are absolutely unique and unto themselves, that you're not going to find a film that looks like this. Yes, everything was very abstract. The shadows, the light and shadows were actually painted onto the sets to give an illusion of depth. And the whole thing, when some people have a problem with Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, it's like my partner on my other show that I do on Wednesday nights, he hated it. And he hated it because, well, it doesn't look realistic. It doesn't make any sense that these buildings are these weird shapes and this weird paint and blah blah blah. And that's the thing that you have to understand when you watch this film is it's meant to depict the mind of a demented person. This is to convey madness, and that's why the film looks the way it does, and it does a brilliant job with it. If you've ever seen Nosferatu, which was directed by F.W. Murnau, and there you go. This was the first depiction of Dracula, and the filmmakers got in trouble because they did not bother to get the rights from Bram Stoker's widow. And ironically, it's the one version more than any we've ever seen that really does follow the book about as close as you're going to get. We're lucky that we actually we have that today, because at the time the estate for Bram Stoker's widow, she wanted every copy burned and destroyed. And so luckily, I think Murnau himself was the one who smuggled a print into the United States. And that's how we have it today. And you can actually see now I have on DVD, this one's got, Caligari, it's got Nosferatu, and it's got the Golem. And it amazes me how many important films out there have just been destroyed or lost to history. And if you really think about it, it's kind of heartbreaking, because there's so many wonderful films and that we've missed and lost. There are certain actors that we'll never ever get to see any of their work because none of it exists. We're very, very lucky that every single film that Charlie Chaplin made is in existence and in beautiful shape. I believe every Buster Keaton film is available. I think most of Harold Lloyd's output, although I don't. I think there's some of his Willie Work and Lonesome Luke films that aren't available. I think those are gone. But as far as the quote unquote glasses character that he came up with, that he's most known for, those are all available. But there are a lot of actors out there who were very important in cinema in the 1910s and 20s that their work, it's just been eliminated and erased, because back then film was disposable, and film was on what was known as nitrate stock, which was highly flammable. And you heard all the time about studio fires where their vaults would just go up in flames because it would spontaneously combust and it burned fast. So being able to have any of these films at all is really something to be treasured. One of the ones that is a classic film is The Man Who Laughs, with, again, Conrad Veidt, who was in Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And as you can see from the still, this is the one that Bob Kane and his assistant Bill Finger got the idea for the Joker. And you can see clearly how that came about. A wonderfully tragic love story more than a horror film, but it does have some horrific moments. Again, that's one that is available. And, again, thank God for that, because, I think there's so many people who dislike old films, black and white films. They just have a problem with them. And what they don't realize is that this is a big part of our history as a country. And, and also, include, European cinema as well at this time. European cinema, frankly, was quite advanced in comparison to ours. And if you ignore all that history, I think you're missing out on seeing how storytelling in the visual medium came to be. Another big film from that era was another German import. A lot of these, you notice, come from Germany, because the Germans had a really great way with the dark fairy tale. And this one's The Golem, directed by and starring Paul Wegener. And the 1920 version that this is a picture from is considered the definitive version. He did the character, I think, 3 times, and this one was considered the best one, where he's the immortal golem of Hebraic folklore, who is brought to life to defend the downtrodden Jews in Europe from their oppressors. And again, that's, not only is that a horror film, but it also, again, brings up a lot of stuff about history and the status of the Jews in Europe, and kind of shows you that things never really changed for them. If you were Jewish in Europe, not just in the 19th or the 20th century, but for centuries, you've been oppressed. And one of the great things about Germany, though, is that they brought a lot of those directors and that sensibility, that Germanic sensibility, to the United States. And they created some of the most beautiful horror films of the 20s, 1920s, and the 30s, especially for Universal Pictures. One of the ones that the great Paul Leni directed, and again, still exists. And actually, here you go. Here it is, Cat and the Canary. Now, this is a film that's been remade a bunch of times. It was remade in 1930 in a version that sadly doesn't exist anymore. It was one of those ones, like I was saying, that got lost to history. And there was a version in 1939 with new movie star Bob Hope and Paulette Goddard. But this is the original. And I love this shot. It's funny when you see this, people are like, God, that looks stupid. But you got to remember in 1927, something like that looked creepy as hell. And this shot's a little overlit comparison to what you see in the actual film. They kept him for the most part in the shadows, so he looked a lot creepier, which, after all, that's the idea. And I've got another one here that from that I love. Let me bring it up. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. Even by this point in time, you're talking about, what became the cliche, the hand coming out of the secret panel in the bookcase. And this also, I have to remind myself, there's another remake that was done in, I believe, 1978 by Radley Metzger, that starred Carol Lindley, and which is actually a fun a fun film. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek version of the story. Another film that I think it's more of a comedy horror film, but it has some great set design, and that's Seven Footprints to Satan. And as you can see right there's the 7 steps, and it looks like, like the hooded devil with all his concubines and everything. Good stuff. And there's a monster creature in there as well that menaces our hero. And as was pretty typical for that time, it turns out to all be a joke played on our hero. Yes, there we go. There's the evil creature. But one of the big stars from this era who really dominated horror films, and it's funny nowadays we think of this guy as a horror star. In reality, he was really a character actor who just happened to be remembered for some vivid portrayals in horror film, and that's Lon Chaney Sr. And the one he's known for the most is Phantom of the Opera, which was a huge hit for Universal. And if you've ever seen the makeup for this, the makeup to this day is still an iconic makeup that so many people, everybody, even if you've never seen this film, this makeup, you recognize this makeup, and with good reason. It's a stunning makeup. I mean, look at him right there. Now, bear in mind too that one of the things that he was really known for was the fact that he did his own makeup, and the makeup that he did for this character, in addition to the vampire that he played in London After Midnight, required him to have wires to make his eyes bug out, and also prosthetics in his mouth for his teeth that were extremely painful. And so his dedication to his craft is one of the things that he's really admired for, even to this day. But like I said, he's known as a horror actor, but he's really, he was really more of a character actor, because he did a lot of drama. and even some comedy. A film that I'm going to bring up here is imported from Denmark. Was called Hexen, and is basically done in documentary fashion about witchcraft. And this is a film that is, the imagery in this is just stunning, and not what you would see in America at this time, because there's actually there's frontal nudity in this, and the depiction of the devil and witchcraft. It's the kind of thing that for that time, I'm really surprised that this film didn't get banned, because it's nightmarish. As you can see in this still here, with you've got the devil and witches and demons and stuff, and if you can see in the devil's hand, they're sacrificing a baby, for God's sake. I mean, that's the kind of stuff in America you wouldn't see anything like this probably until like around the time of Rosemary's Baby or something. That's pretty mind-blowing. But again, the Europeans, always were a little advanced ahead of America and their more puritanical outlook on things. Here's another bizarre scene from Hexen with these giant pig-headed people. It's just, I don't know. I own this film, and I don't know what the hell's going on in this. It's such a weird film. But as you got to the end of the 20th century, or the 20th century, geez, the 1920s, horror films, had kind of reached a point where else is there to go? And, there's some beautiful stuff. Like I said, if you watch The Cat and the Canary, if you watch The Sorrows of Satan, there's some really stunning stuff that was done. But really, they got to a point where what's left to do? And in 1928, with the advent of sound, thanks to films like The Jazz Singer and Manhattan Melodrama, sound was the next logical step for horror. And the very, very first film, horror film with sound, was called The Terror. And this is an ad for it. The interesting thing with The Terror is it wasn't just a talking horror film. And really, it was more of an old dark house mystery in the style of The Cat and the Canary that I discussed earlier. But the novelty of sound, and the fact that for the very first time you could hear that wind howling, you could hear the floor creak, you could hear the heroine scream. I love this shot right here with the hooded villain clasping our heroine. What a great shot. If there's one thing that works in horror's favor, it's black and white. Not that I don't like color horror films, because there's a lot of wonderful color horror films, but black and white, there's something about light and shadow that just works so much better without color. And the opening credits for The Terror were actually, they don't even show the opening credits. They have the actor Conrad Nagel comes out and he reads the credits to you. That's how much of an innovation sound was. Yes, we've got to show you, we've got to have somebody read it to you, because it's so exciting to hear somebody's name said, like musical direction by so and so, and again, it's interesting to watch. It's fun because you get to see just how at that point in time things were so primitive. And the early sound films, a lot of them are they're so hard to sit through, because they got put in a position where in the 1920s, when you didn't have to worry about sound, you had beautiful fluid camera work wonderful tracking shots, even handheld camera work. When they went into sound, you had to have everything next to the microphones. They'd hide the microphones all over the set. And so they would basically bolt the camera to the floor. And so there's some of the most boring films to watch because they're so static. It's very much like watching a stage play. It's very painful. And the first 2 or 3 years, probably 28, 29, and 30, the sound, so many of them didn't even have sound on film. It was sound on disc. So that trying to synchronize everything so the sound effects and the voices would match up was a bear. And the sound itself was very tinny and hollow. I watched The Coconuts the other day, which was, the very first feature film from the Marx Brothers, and man, the sound in that is just brutal to listen to. It's incredibly, how do I put this politely? Terrible, terrible to listen to. It's just one of those things where you're forced to deal with the limitations of the medium. And it's sad because as much as I love the Marx Brothers, and I do, when you watch The Coconuts, holy mackerel, what a hard slog to sit through, because it is early sound not your friend. But next week on the show, I'm going to get into the burgeoning sound industry, and of course, what's the one studio that comes to mind when you think early 30s horror? It's Universal. Universal practically lived off horror for the first 5 years of the 1930s, and we'll be talking about the rise of the horror stars, as in Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, Lionel Atwill, George Zucco, and to a lesser extent, like Dwight Fry or Edward Van Sloan, John Carradine, et cetera, et cetera. Once Universal got off the ground with their horror series and people saw the profits, the other studios decided to absolutely pile on and jump in. Paramount in particular had an MGM, of all studios, which is surprising, put out some pretty classic films during that era as well. And we'll be talking about that next time. And just a note to the viewers, in the future, it'll be probably another couple of months, I'm actually going to be doing this from a professional broadcast studio. So it's going to be a little more polished looking, a little more like you're actually watching real television. And I'll be showing clips and stuff instead of just still photos. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next week. If you haven't had a chance, like I said earlier, if you haven't seen The Witch, it's a film that I think you really should check out. And I will see you next week, and have a great week.